Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. So begins Daphne du Maurier's 1938 novel Rebecca, a book dismissed by the critics of the day, but which has since become a classic, a dark psychological thriller that tells of one woman's struggle to shrug off the posthumous shadow of another, and in the process find herself, whatever the cost. The narrator through whose eyes the story unfolds is never named, other than as the wife of the man she marries, a point we'll return to later. Yet, thanks to that memorable opening line, we gain instant admission to her private world. That's the beauty of writing in the I voice, better known as the first-person singular narrative. It gives us a direct line to the narrator's innermost thoughts. We become privy to their secrets. We share their tension. In Rebecca, a woman reflects on the time she was swept off her feet by Maxim de Winter, a handsome older man, and after a whirlwind courtship, installed as the mistress of Manderley, her husband's family seat in Cornwall. De Winter, it turns out, has been married before to Rebecca, a woman who died under tragic circumstances, but whose fiery spirit still pervades her former home. In our narrator's eyes, Rebecca is everything she is not, the perfect woman, possessed of beauty, brains, and breeding, as her aging mother-in-law puts it. But although she is plagued by self-doubt and seemingly out of her depth, our narrator sets out to lay her rival's ghost to rest, and in so doing win her husband's approval. The writer's task is to take us with her on her journey. Writing in the first person is one of the most effective ways to establish an intimate relationship between your central character and the reader, but there are pitfalls to trap the unwary. So let's start by looking at these and how to avoid them. Rule number 1. Even if you're using the I voice, remember that it's your character speaking, not you. This might sound obvious, but it's easy to forget. From the moment we learn to talk, we use I to express what we think, what we want, what we feel. To write successfully in the first person, you need to step out of your own skin and into your characters. What do they think, want, feel? Don't write anything until you're sure you really know your character. And even then, every time you're about to write I, ask yourself, is this my character talking, or is it me? Rule number 2. In the first person, it's all too easy to filter what you want to say through the narrator, so that you keep writing, I said, I felt, I thought, and so on. Well, isn't that the whole point, I hear you ask? Well, no, actually. In a first-person narrative, we're already privy to the narrator's thoughts. We don't need constant reminders. So here's another tip. Every time you're tempted to write a sentence beginning with I, stop and consider for a moment whether you really need it, or whether it's just another of those pesky filter phrases. Rule number 3. Well, there had to be 3, didn't there? In the first person, be very careful how you introduce information that lies beyond the narrator's direct experience. Narrators are not, as a general rule, psychic, so don't have them know more than they can reasonably be expected to know. Compare, I stepped into the room, it seemed to have been redecorated, and I stepped into the recently redecorated room. See what I mean? The second sentence may be shorter, but it doesn't sound right. How did the narrator know the room had recently been redecorated? In Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier makes a virtue of her narrator's ignorance by having the people around her know things she doesn't, thereby adding to the narrative tension. This in itself is a great device for storytelling in the first person. But if your narrator needs to know something in order to move the story forward, always ask yourself, how do they know? Okay. In the next episode, we'll delve into Rebecca in more detail to see how the author puts the principles we've discussed here into practice. I know we talked about the risks of overusing I said this, I did that, but rules are made to be broken. In fact, there are times when it's perfectly okay to keep repeating I, as the narrator of Rebecca does here. I turned and ran blindly through the archway to the corridors beyond. I caught a glimpse of the astonished face of the drummer who had announced me. I brushed past him, stumbling, not looking where I went. Why do you think Daphne du Maurier chose to write in this style? What effect was she trying to achieve? You can compare your answer with ours in the downloadable notes.